Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Welcome back. We're happy to have you tune in, and we hope we always hear from you. And I hope you have some questions because we have a most interesting guest today. You will be hearing from him soon. That is Dr. Ross Dunseath. But first, I think, Fahrusha, you have some announcements?
Well, we have one very big announcement here at Shattered Reality. We are now on iTunes. We finally got 8 episodes, and so we submitted our podcast to iTunes, and voila, we are on. In any case, that's the most important announcement that we have. The second announcement revolves around, oddly, a client of mine. I've written a blog piece about a client of mine who is the daughter of the late Dr. Max Jacobson, Dr. Feelgood, who treated Kennedy and Nixon and other famous people. And this kind lady lives in Brooklyn, New York. And the night of the German Wings crash, the night before, they're 6 hours ahead of us over there in that time zone of Europe. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and Jill Jacobson couldn't get to sleep. And she was restless, but perhaps in a liminal state. And these words kept rolling through her mind, and she couldn't rest until she got up and wrote the words down. And the words revolved around jet fuel and crashing a plane and flying and wings and a lot of other things that I'd kind of like you to take a look at, dear listeners, if you'd like to become dear readers. And this is at Fahrusha.wordpress.com, and it is an account of what happened to Jill Jacobson and the poem that she wrote and forgot about the night, few hours before the German Wings crash. That's my second announcement. And now we're going to go to our main programming, which is the very interesting, fascinating, intelligent guest that we have for you today, Dr. Ross Dunseath. Dr. Dunseath does work at the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia. He is also associated with the Cedar Creek Institute, which may be another name for the Department of Perceptual Studies. I'm sure he'll set us straight with that. And he works with such parapsychological luminaries as James Tucker and Dr. Ed Kelly and the late Dr. Ian Stevenson. So I'd like you to welcome Dr. Ross Dunseath to our show, and his specialty is psychokinesis. Dr. Dunseath, do you mind if we call you Ross?
Well, no, go right ahead.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to start. Obviously, your background is in electrical engineering, and you still do that type of work with medical instrumentation. Now, that is a long distance away from any of the so-called paranormal ones. How did you ever get into that? Was there a precipitating episode or event?
Well, it's actually not as far away as you might think, but I really got introduced to all this stuff as an undergrad at Duke University back in the 1970s. I hate to admit it was that long ago, but working in or as a student in electrical engineering, there was a lab there called the Experiential Learning Lab, and that was run by Dr. John Artley, the late Dr. Artley. When I first started getting active in that lab, that was mostly biofeedback, EEG biofeedback, and then Ed Kelly joined the lab. and brought in psi research. And his interest at the time was to try to combine physiological monitoring with controlled psi tasks, which is what we're still working on to this day. But that's how I got my start in it as an undergrad engineering student.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I applied to Duke after I left high school, and because they were the only institute at the time that went into paranormal research, and I was accepted, and I was frightened and left. It seemed a little bit too real to me, and I thought, I don't think I want to investigate ghosts.
That is it. That's Kate speaking.
I'm sorry.
No, I don't know if we're decipherable. Did you meet Dr. Ryan when you were there as well?
No, I never did.
Too bad.
I'm really sorry I didn't get a chance to. But when I was there as an undergrad, there were 3 different places doing psi research in Durham, North Carolina.
Wow.
So there was the Ryan Institute, which back then was known as the Foundation for Research into the Nature of Man, and they had moved off of Duke campus to a big house right across the street. And then there was a second place called the PRF, the Psychical Research Foundation, I guess, or I thought it was Psychical Research Center. That was run by Bill Roll, who's pretty famous for poltergeist studies. And then our little lab in the electrical engineering department.
Well, did Doris Duke back any of those? Was she interested in that?
Not that I know of. No.
It was just out of curiosity. So what have you found? Anything? I've known you. Obviously, you've been studying this a long time. Have you sort of found any clues as to what is behind all of these so-called telekinesis?
Psychokinesis.
We have to.
We have a bone of contention here at Shattered Reality.
Sorry.
No, sorry. Don't be sorry. It's nothing to be sorry about. I realized I was saying that one of the first things we should speak to you about is for you. I understand that your main field of interest is psychokinesis, and Kate then said telekinesis, and I said, I think that's, more like teleporting from a greater distance, like making something appear that wasn't there before, whereas psychokinesis is moving something like an object across a table or something of that nature, or bending spoons, as we at the Monroe Institute like to do.
Well, let's throw a third term in there just to really get it confusing. How about mind-matter interaction?
Okay, I like that one.
That's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of different terms for the same thing. I mean, I think telekinesis really means affecting something at a distance. So you have tele, which is from a distance, and kinesis, which is, movement. And then psychokinesis would be affecting something with your mind. And then it can all just fall into mind-matter interaction, MMI. So the terminology is a problem with all this. Every few years, it seems like in the world of parapsychology, they undergo an upheaval about what these things are called. So, the famous ESP and extrasensory perception and PK psychokinesis, and there's clairvoyance, which is essentially finding out some information that you shouldn't know, but that would sort of fall under the category of ESP. But ESP could also include telepathy, which would be mind-to-mind communication. So there's a lot of different, and then precognition, like the lady you were describing with the poem the night before the crash.
Right. Just hours before, as it turns out, but yes.
Right. So lots of different terms.
Well, we basically just wanted to clear up for our less, I don't want to say less informed listeners, but less informed listeners, what psychokinesis actually was before we took the ball and ran with the psychokinesis and spoke with you. So I think you've let everybody know quite clearly.
Including me. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I can just give you a real short history about psychokinesis.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
It's been known about for, a few thousand years, really. I'd say the first instances of it that have been recorded were these so-called poltergeist type events, which are classically like showers of rocks raining down on the roof of the house, or things flying across the room, almost like a mischievous, ghost or spirit is getting in and messing around with things. And it's been recorded for quite a while, these type of activities. And then the next big thing that came along probably was in the late 1800s, the spiritualists.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Materializing things, and the most famous of those was D.D. Hume, who
Yes.
could levitate. Oh, and speaking of levitation, there was also in the 15th or 16th century a very famous monk, Saint Joseph of Cupertino, who levitated all the time. He became rather infamous. The Catholic Church was really rather embarrassed by it and kept moving him from monastery to monastery, but the word would get out that this guy's floating, and the crowds would gather.
I love it.
He was kind of like a medieval rock star.
I can see why. Yes.
Yeah, witnessed by kings and queens, and so that was quite a story. And then D.D. Hume was similar to that. He was a medium who levitated. He also levitated objects and did a lot of quite fantastic macro PK type things in controlled conditions, and was studied by scientists of the time, some of whom got into trouble for it. Sir William Crookes studied him and published papers about it. They actually did measurements using scales and found that he was reducing the weight of objects or lifting extremely heavy tables, causing them to levitate that most people could not. It would take 3 or 4 people to lift this table, and he was just levitating it. And so, then from there, in the early 20s, I think there was a rather famous case of some psychics who were able to bend light beams. That was accidentally discovered. And then it sort of evolved into laboratory research, starting with J.B. Rhine, who tried to get it, in a controlled statistical type of study circumstance. And they were using cards or dice specifically for PK. And then in the 1960s, Helmut Schmidt at the Rhine Center discovered that you could use a radioactive source and PK the random radioactive decay and change the statistics
Wow.
of the way that the decay was happening. So that came to be called micro PK because it was happening on a quantum level as opposed to sort of the macro PK of D.D. Hume and other psychics.
What about Olga? I can never remember or pronounce.
Olga Worrell.
No, Olga Kulgolin.
I was thinking of Blavatsky.
The one who was, I believe she was in Georgia, in Soviet, at that time, Soviet Georgia, and in some way, some of the things that she did, I understood or read, was the reason that the United States government got into trying to beat the Soviets in their psychic research, and thus the remote viewing project was born. But what she did, she was a Georgian woman, and she moved objects across the table in front of a lot of Soviet scientists, and they released a movie of it. I'm going to say in the 50s or 60s. It was a long time ago. The woman is passed at this juncture, I'm quite sure. Mm-hmm. You don't know her offhand?
No, I know who you're talking about, yeah.
Olga Kulgolin or something. It's like almost like a Russian Kilgallen, but it's Kulgolin or something like that. I
can't remember her name right now, but yes, she was filmed moving objects, and you're right, that did cause quite a stir. So that would be an example of macro PK. And there was we have a film actually of a U.S. woman from New York who was able to move objects as well with her hands. In fact, she used that model of the Russian lady.
Really? You don't know where she lives or lived in New York. There's a reason why I asked about that, because the fellow who started the Mormon religion, whose name is Smith, Joseph Smith, and the Fox sisters, the famous table-rapping Fox sisters, lived just miles apart from one another, which is also in a hotbed area of UFO sightings. So I'm wondering about the geomagnetic properties or Earth energies that might be involved there. So that's why I was wondering where this woman in New York lived who did the PK.
Well, as far as I know, it was in New York City.
Okay,
And
not the same place.
No, and she worked very hard at this. It took a lot of effort, and it took a lot out of her to do it.
Yes.
So, a different kind of model. There's different ways that people approach PK, and for some, it's the no-effort approach. For others, they have to expend mighty effort.
I had a friend that used to do that, but she'd do it as a joke. Like if you were in back then everybody smoked, and she'd just move ashtrays across the table, and she'd just laugh about it, and she thought everybody had that ability. And it was interesting, and if people questioned her, she'd just look at a picture and it would come off the wall, but she didn't put any effort into it though. Yeah, it was strange.
Go ahead, Ross.
I was just going to say, we're looking for people like that. So if you...
Oh, yeah, no, she's not around anymore.
Well, if you know anybody who's doing things like that, please tell them to get in touch.
I definitely will.
I know...
Or if you're out there, if any of our listeners...
I know two brothers, one of whom is a ventriloquist. And these two brothers apparently move things between them. They sit opposite table from one another. I don't know if they're twins. They might be twins, or they might be very close in age. And they apparently move things. But I wouldn't send them to you, Ross, until I saw the evidence first.
Okay.
But anyway, to sort of get back to it, you do EEGs and MRIs, and I was wondering, since you do have some of the subjects that do this, have you seen anything that would take the so-called paranormal into the normal range? I mean, have you any evidence of changes in brain waves or anything of that nature?
Well, of course, that's what we're after.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a bunch of preliminary data. We just came off of a 1.5-year pilot study. And there's two tasks that we have to make happen for these kinds of studies. One of them is we have to be able to reliably detect quote-unquote PK and do it electronically, so we can merge that data in simultaneously with the physiology, the EEG data. So we end up having to run these things in controlled trials. They're timed. You have to do several of them. Like my standard protocol right now is 48 trials, 48 seconds each, alternating between rest and PK. And as you can see, that's a difficult task to get somebody to turn PK on and off like that.
Oh, yeah.
And also in the process of doing that, we accumulate mountains of data. So, and it took a while as well to get all these various protocols programmed and all the hardware and everything running synchronized and whatnot. So my pilot study that I just finished, I've got significant results. And out of those significant results in terms of getting PK hits, I was running EEGs on, I would say, 2 really good prospects for seeing something. And the first of those, we've started doing some of the EEG analysis, and that's the second big challenge, is dealing with EEG data. So in order to get good, analyzable EEG data, the subject of the experiment really can't be moving very much. They can't be chewing or moving their eyes or talking or moving their hands. I mean, they can do that, but if it's causing too much interference, we have to throw that trial out. And so now we have to go through all these trials manually and judge whether they're any artifact. And that's about the stage where we're in, is grinding through, visually looking at the EEG data. But what I can say preliminarily is in one case, the person has a really odd, EEG. It's a very odd activation in the PK mode versus his rest mode. And it's like changing in frequency. The spectral peak frequency is shifting as you go along his head. So mapping across spatially, across the brain, there's a different frequency.
From a certain part of the brain is a different frequency?
Yeah. And then also there's some weird anti-symmetry. So one side is set up in one way, and the other side is sort of the opposite of it. In other words, like one side of the head, the electrodes have a spectral peak at a certain frequency, and the other side, it's a deep dip. Like that frequency is like gone; it's missing. So,
oh my goodness!
Yeah, this is all very preliminary.
Does this have to do with the dominance of the right or left hemisphere, or am I listening wrong? Am I hearing wrong? I'm not getting it.
At this point, I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I don't know if it's showing dominance or not.
And then one other question about this, in a very broad sense. I know you're measuring, everything to a very fine degree, but in a very broad sense, is the person, this particular person, in an alpha state when they're moving things, or are they in a beta, or is there any, like, a broader place that you can say that generally it happens in alpha, for instance, or it happens in delta?
Well, that was the odd thing about this particular person. It was extending along a range of frequencies that you couldn't even say that anymore. It was running from like theta all the way down through alpha.
Wow.
So you couldn't really say, oh, this person's in an alpha state. Well, you could say, well, part of their brain's in an alpha state, but this other part over here is in the peaking in a theta frequency.
Wow.
Did you use a control subject at the same time? Was there someone whose EEG you were measuring and finding sort of what I guess would be referred to as normal EEG?
No, that's they do that. That's called a standard EEG or whatever, based on a person's age and sex and whatnot. There's kind of what you would expect to see in a standard EEG, and well, eventually we'll trundle that out and compare. But I can already say this person doesn't have a standard-looking EEG.
Like you see,
sounds like nothing like it, actually.
No, I've never seen any. I've seen a fair amount of EEGs over the years, and I have not seen one that looked like that. But this is not to say that you have to have an EEG that looks like that in order to make PK happen. That's we don't know yet.
But if you had been in a lab doing EEGs, say for medical research or something, and you suddenly saw this one, you go, "Whoa, wait a minute! This does not look normal." Is that the case?
If I saw something that looked like that, yeah, I would be
interesting.
Checking out the equipment, right?
But this is just one subject, so ostensibly other subjects have provided other data.
And we're in the early stages of crunching that. So we're launched into the formal study now, in which we're only accepting what we would call PK experts into the study.
Cool.
So in order to get into the study, you've got to pass a preliminary exam, we'll call it, a screening test. And we have one person that's done that so far.
Demonstrable PK, we will call it.
Yeah, he did it remotely. So we run remote experiments as well. That's one of our screening tools. We can get a person on Skype and let them run through the protocol, 48 trials, 48 seconds each, rest versus PK, and he got significant results. So he visited the lab. He's a healer. He does energy healing.
Oh, I think I might have an idea who that might be. I don't know. I guess we're not at liberty to say the person's name. I won't say.
Oh, no, I don't think he would mind. It's Edwards.
Ed Edwards, yes. I was just speaking with our mutual friend, Leslie, about Ed Edwards. And well, just to set the record straight, I know Dr. Ross Dunseath as a person who is a fellow member of the professional division of the Monroe Institute. And in addition, he holds the title of having attended the most MC² programs at the Monroe Institute. Do you want to tell us about that a little bit?
Well, that's been a lot of fun. I got introduced to Joe Gallenberger. And by the way, Joe's one of the people that came to our lab and got successful PK.
Oh, good.
And actually has the bizarre EEG that we were just discussing.
Oh, Joe, really?
That's Joe. And I know he doesn't mind if we mention him.
That. Well, maybe it'll help him sell more books about Las Vegas. I don't know.
Well, I can say he demonstrated, in our protocol, significant PK effects. So
yeah, he's quite a nice fellow. I really like Joe, and so I'm happy to
I was just going to say,
him.
Can you move the dice?
Well, he does. I mean,
really?
we practiced doing that at
Seriously?
at TMI at this MC².
Maybe we shouldn't mention that though.
What?
Being able to move dice.
Why?
Maybe they wouldn't let him into the tables. I don't know.
No, he wrote a book about it. They're already going to let him in the tables.
Okay.
I had a friend who was a card counter, and he was banned from Atlantic City and Las Vegas. A lot of the
they don't like them.
No, they didn't like him at all. But back to Dr. Ross here, well, just you want to tell us a little bit about your adventures at MC²?
Sure. So I met Joe at a gateway.
A gateway. I think that not everybody, although most of our listeners have heard of the Monroe Institute because I've spoken of it before as my own personal Hogwarts in Virginia. But you should probably, explain like what is a gateway and what is MC². Not volumes, but just briefly. Sure.
Well, I guess if nobody's familiar with the Monroe Institute, or for someone who's not familiar with it, they're located in central Virginia, and they were started by Robert Monroe, who wrote Journeys Out of the Body. He discovered some various audio techniques. I think a lot of people have heard of binaural beats or hemisync, and found that using these techniques, people could have altered states of consciousness type experiences. So they started a center for this in central Virginia in the mountains. It's an absolutely beautiful place. And people can come and do various programs. Most of them last for about a week. The beginning program is called the Gateway. And I took the Gateway program, 4 or 5 years ago, being as how we live in Charlottesville, just right up the road. I wanted to go experience it. And one of my facilitators was Joe Gallenberger, and I happened to mention I was setting up to run PK studies at UVA, not knowing that Joe does MC² program. Well, this is a different program at the Monroe that's focused on psychokinesis, healing, mind over matter, making things happen in your world. And we got to talking, and I said that I had portable equipment. I was trying to develop sensors, and it would be great to be able to run these, in groups of people, with groups of people who are studying, trying to learn how to do PK. And Joe very graciously volunteered to let me run at MC Squared. So I started coming to MC Squareds on Wednesday evenings, bringing all my gear, and setting up with arrays of various sensors I was developing. And we discovered over time some particularly good ones. Then I've accumulated a fair amount of data, probably 2 rounds now. The first round, I came out with significant results overall, comparing when people were trying to do PK, trying to affect these sensors versus rest periods. And we were even able to go to the level of what types of exercises they were doing seemed to be the most efficient at causing the sensors to respond. And we would also work with small groups or individuals after the main session with large groups. And some of these experiences have been really pretty interesting. Sometimes some people can get going and really cause a large effect on
It's
the
like
sensors.
having been there, not when you were there, but having taken that class, and the feeling one gets when it goes is kind of like when you're a gambler and you're on a run.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with people saying that sort of thing?
Well, from my own personal experience, the one macro PK, maybe I've had a few more, but the one that's the most memorable was a spoon bending event. I went to a spoon bending party in Durham, North Carolina, in I guess the early 1980s. There was an engineer from McDonnell Douglas back then who was traveling around the country giving these spoon bending parties. They consisted of Jack at the beginning showing a slideshow of people bending metal, spoons, forks, whatever, to prove that it could be done. And then in a very party-like atmosphere, people would start bending. And we were doing that in conjunction with the Experiential Learning Lab at Duke. So we took over all the various metal, spoons. We even had 3/8-inch steel rods. And people started bending.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack, got everybody all excited. They were bending. There was even a woman who had to be in her 70s, maybe 80 years old, who took that 3/8-inch steel rod that nobody could physically bend. And by the end of the evening, she had it in about, maybe 25 degree angle. And so people were bending left and right. I had a spoon in my hand and nothing was happening. So a couple of people came over and stood next to me and started chanting, bend, bend, bend. And these were folks who were bending. So I was holding on to the spoon, and I felt that spoon turn into taffy.
Yeah.
Absolute taffy. And I quickly rolled 2 complete 360-degree spirals.
Yep. It happens.
And then it went stiff again. Later on, I took another spoon. It was exactly the same type. I tried to bend it by force.
Yes.
And it snapped off before it even got to 90 degrees.
Yes. I've had experience with that, and to me, I sort of wait for the right moment, and I push it one way, I push it the other way without bending it, just pushing it a little bit one way or another, and then you get the feeling it's going to go. You feel it's going to go, and then suddenly you just twist it into a couple of spirals, and there it goes. But I do touch it. Ross. I admit I do touch the spoon. I just go back and forth, just looking at it, feel it, and then the metal gets loose. It gets more like aluminum foil than stainless steel. That's the only way I can sort of describe it myself.
Well, if you're bending metal, we need to have you come visit us in the lab.
Wow.
Okay.
But actually, that almost touches on something like all the spiritual types where they have ritual dances and so on. Any of these sort of large groups of people affecting change in something or other.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'd be interesting if you could hook up two people doing this telekinesis to the same EEG machine and see what would happen if it would.
Oh, a group effort.
Yeah.
Some form of a group effort. Yeah. That.
Well, there's actually been research done on both of those things.
Yeah.
The group research is centered around random number generators.
Oh, yes. That's micro PK again, isn't it? Or is it?
Yes, it's micro PK, so it's like looking at a statistical effect. And what has been published, I think, at least 3 or 4 papers now, that when groups seem to get coherent, so like they're doing meditation or some other things that just get the group to be
Football
coherent
game.
is the best word I can describe.
No,
Yeah,
football games, the home team advantage, always. I mean, it's, there's more people there for your team at home than the opposing team. And it's actually recognized in sports as the home team advantage. And they get that's why you have cheerleaders that everybody chants together.
right. So those RNGs will go off random.
You betcha.
And of course, that's the Global Consciousness Project.
Yes.
That was started by folks from the Paralab at Princeton, where they've set up a network of random number generators all over the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And they saw that the statistical relationship of these various RNGs shift based on worldwide events that grab the attention of the entire planet. So there was a measurable shift on 9/11, for example.
Yes.
And there was one when Diana was buried, or the day of her funeral, Princess Diana. And there have been others. I think big sporting events have caused things to go off random as well.
I always feel like the atmosphere gets very quiet, like even the voices in my head quiet down before a major cataclysm of some sort occurs. Things seem to get a bit quiet. Our last guest, by the way, was Angela Thompson-Smith, who I believe was associated with the Paralab in Princeton. She's the remote viewer who's out in Las Vegas now. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but be that as it may. So, so now this project that you're doing currently, is this in conjunction with Dr. Ed Kelly as well?
Yeah, Ed is the co-director of the lab with me, and he's really the neuroscientist behind all this effort and parapsychologist. I'm more of the engineer. So between the two of us, I think we're covering most of the territory.
Well, that's exciting. That's very exciting. But if for our uninformed listeners who might have thought that doing parapsychology was extraordinarily glamorous for the most part, it's extraordinarily hard work, amassing data, crunching numbers, isn't it?
Yes, it's a slog. You do have to acquire lots of data and be very meticulous about how you analyze the data and be prepared for unrelenting criticism, because in the mainstream scientific world, they don't allow these types of things to have any credence. Therefore, they can't possibly happen. Therefore, whatever you're doing has to be wrong. You've made a mistake somewhere. Just a priori, it's wrong. So parapsychologists have to go to great lengths to show that there's no mistakes in the technical aspects of their work.
Indeed. And would you think, I mean, my thought is that this is due to the fact that although physics has moved forward into the 21st century, most of the scientists live with the 19th century paradigm of the clockwork universe and the solidity of matter, and they don't account for more modern theories of physics like string theory and quantum physics, all 20th century physics. They've not even gotten into the 21st century with their ideas.
Well, I think it's a matter, first of all, that people want a career where things are going to happen. Parapsychology is a very slow science. Things don't happen a lot. So because of that, most working scientists, are into good, reliable physical theories and data, and they pay no attention to the parapsychological data. So they don't know that there's like 100 years worth of amassed data showing that these phenomena are real. So it's partly ignorance, it's partly convenience. And also another thing for a lot of physicists, that all the various quantum philosophies that involve mind and collapsing the waveform and all that business, they don't think about that very much. Quantum theory has been extraordinarily successful in predicting, say, the behavior of solid-state electronic circuitry.
Okay.
And that's what most people use it for. When you start getting into the realm of what they would call philosophy of quantum physics, a lot of people try to avoid it. And there's even still controversy to this day about whether the mind is involved or not, whether the observation that collapsed the
waveform?
The waveform, that's not exactly the right term, but whether that's caused by mind or just by perturbation of the measuring equipment and whatnot, they're still arguing over that. So.
Well,
and we still don't know if Schrodinger's cat made it or not,
Well,
the cat's in the box.
Well, there's that. I don't know. I'm of the opinion that without consciousness, which we're all taking part in, the other stuff is not really important, because otherwise we're all just a bunch of mechanized robots in a dead universe or something.
Yeah, but it all goes back to Descartes, mind and body separation.
But that's dualism.
Yeah, still. Yeah. But I was going to say, you're really actually quite brave to have gone into this. It's typically considered a career killer, and yet you seem to have survived that onslaught, as you mentioned.
And flourished, I can tell you.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't
Ross
been
is
doing it
flourishing.
continuously.
Yeah.
No, well, fortunately, for one thing, I'm an electrical engineer, so I design, instrumentation. Let's see, from about I was 1990 through 2010 or so, I was involved in just straightforward EEG type instrumentation development. We were developing systems that would run inside MRI scanners and things like that. So if I do a little bit of psychic research on the side, they're not going to hold it against me, because the instrumentation, it'll work.
It gets a workout with that, too.
Yeah, and it's needed. So.
And there's probably a suspicion that it might pay off one day, too.
Right. But for the young person who wants to go into parapsychology, yes, that's as a career, as a parapsychologist solely, that is a huge challenge in the United States. There's much more of a opportunity for it in Europe now than there is in the U.S.
Whereabouts?
See, in England, there's 2 or 3 universities. In Edinburgh, Scotland, there's psychic research. In Germany, they have psychic research ongoing. Mm-hmm. So I think there's more openness to it there than there is here.
What do you credit that To what do you credit the closed-mindedness of the American academic world as opposed to the European?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a matter of perhaps this is slowly going to change here as well. Ed Kelly and his fellow editors, Emily Kelly, his wife, and Mike Grosso, Bruce Grayson, who's on our staff here and does near-death experience, they all edited a book called The Irreducible Mind that was published a few years ago, which is essentially a manifesto laying it down to the materialist science world that there are several things that cannot be explained by trying to invoke straight materialism. For example, a lot of the parapsychology data clearly shows that the idea that consciousness is being generated by the activity of the brain simply doesn't cut it.
Right.
And I think that book has been having an impact. So things may slowly open up. I know Ed feels like there's becoming more awareness and more openness to these ideas that consciousness is an important part of the equation, and that it's not generated solely by the flapping of neurons in the brain.
Right, because then who are we, really?
Well, there was an interesting physical question, or philosophical question. They said if, let's say, you could teleport someone a la Star Trek, and absolutely every last little nanoparticle in your body was transported and was perfectly replicated.
Assembled, yeah.
Okay, would your soul go with it? And that is the question.
That is an interesting proposition, but I don't think that the physical sciences are quite up to giving us the model yet.
But they have teleported. Am I correct in that, Dr. Dunseath, that there has been some teleportation of photons or something along?
I thought I've heard something about that, but I'm not up on it. So I don't know.
I think that somewhere in Germany they did move some quanta of matter, some little tiny particles of matter from one place to another, and it was received on the other end, and it happened. But as far as the details, I'm afraid I'm ignorant, but I'm quite sure it happened in southern Germany somewhere.
It all has to do with the entanglement thing, and
I mean, I'm over my head here. Okay. But I would say that I totally agree with the type of things that you are mentioning having to do with this Irreducible Mind book, and who publishes it. So we'll give it a plug here. I mean, not that we're going to make the difference for the book, because we don't know how many scientists listen to our...
Well, I'm going to buy it.
I'm going to get
Sounds
it.
Sounds good.
Sounds good to us. So why don't you give us repeat the details for our listeners who might be interested?
Yeah, it's called Irreducible Mind, edited by Ed Kelly, Emily Kelly, Bruce Grayson, Mike Grosso. I think it's published by McFarlane.
Okay, all right. So
and they just actually came out with another book too. I'll throw in a plug for that one. It's called Beyond Physicalism. So that's Ed Kelly is the editor, and I think Adam Crabtree is editor for both of these books as well. And that book is about some of the theories that could help elucidate how it is that mind may exist without the brain.
Well, I try not to be too dualistic and try to, look at consciousness as the primary element of not of creation, of beingness, consciousness, and without consciousness there's nothing. But do tell us, Ross, other than your spoon bending parties, etc., and experiences at the Monroe Institute, like with class there, have there been other experiences that pulled you into this field? In other words, a personal experience, such as did a UFO land on your lawn, or did you see your grandmother's ghost floating in your window one night? Or I'm being silly, I'm granted being quite silly, but was there some paramount event that occurred earlier in your life that you would like to share with us?
As I think about it, I was always interested in this sort of thing, even in grade school. I can't say there was any huge precipitating event, except that I got to Duke University in Durham, and there was so much research going on at the time, and I got to meet some really interesting psychic folks and see research in action. And I did get to experience one, aside from that spoon bending event, a really good laboratory case under controlled conditions with controlled instrumentation, where a person was able to affect what I think is probably indisputable evidence for PK.
Okay.
And I've got the chart recording of that. I like to use it when I give talks as a motivation for studying more macro PK instead of micro PK.
What did they move?
This was if you're familiar with the old phonograph record players, they had crystal cartridges in them. Those things are sensitive to force, to vibration. So I built up some instrumentation that used those things as force detectors. And I have one suspended in a glass tube, and another one mounted on the big granite rock that the whole equipment was resting on. So it was the second one was picking up environmental vibration.
Okay.
As a control. The first one in the tube was the target. And on one particular occasion, a person came in, and it was rather spontaneous. And after about a half an hour of sitting quietly with the system, suddenly the detector went off. It started getting a rather large signal on it, whereas the control was absolutely quiet. There was no environmental vibration causing this. At that point, the person said, I've managed to put my energy into the sensor. So now, we're talking the same level of force that a phonograph needle experiences riding on the grooves of a record.
Okay.
And that's, okay, you might say that's kind of little. Maybe we could call it mini PK. But, it's there. It's physical. It's in this world. It's enough to make you hear music coming from a piece of vinyl.
Exactly.
And then to top it off, they got up and left the room. It stayed activated. Then they went back in the room, sat down and said, all right, I'm going to pull my energy out of it. And we watched that signal go down.
Wow.
So I thought that was a really fairly shocking demonstration of PK.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful demonstration. I believe you gave a talk about it at the PD 2 years ago. Did you not?
Yeah, so I say I like to use that one as a...
Yeah, because I remembered it when you started talking about it. I remembered it, and it was very, very, very impressive, and still is. And how has Mr. Ed Edwards done?
I don't know yet. We've got a lot of data now. This brings up another interesting part of the equation with this kind of research, especially sort of on the macro side of things. If the macro PK gets going, there can be a pretty good chance that the whole electronic system is going to collapse.
Uh-oh.
And I've had that happen to me a couple of times. So, for example, I was in La Madera, New Mexico, had a field system set up. We were working with the local healer and the community healer who'd been doing this for a million years, and he had a client that morning. and this person had a huge cathartic emotional release. And just at that moment that happened, the electronics shut down.
Huh. Do you want to tell him about what happened with us here? With the
No, you go right ahead.
No, I think it's the first time that you and I and the late great Valerie. We've had a lot of issues.
The Tesla effect.
What Jackie likes to call the Tesla effect, where our system, just collapses, things disappear, it crashes, it's just unexplained. I think you should tell the Valerie story with that particular one.
We were just recording an interview, and it was
the old Kate Valentine show, not this show. Yes,
and
radio.
Bill was there, and Dave Margolotti was the station manager, and Dave is very OCD and takes care of everything, as does Bill. And between the two of them, we never lost a recording. But this young lady, I said, "Oh, that's great! Fahrusha, Valerie will make this little show together." And boom, the recording disappeared. It couldn't be found. Dave, I think, is still looking for it.
Well, it disappeared off more than one machine.
That's what I meant. Yeah, all of them.
There
was a backup recording, the initial recording. Bill had it, remember? And
it disappeared from multiple places.
Weird.
And we have had other less.
Well, there was the atomic clock at the studio, which they used, of course, because it was on the air at that time, and timing had to be very, very carefully measured. And, Bill was there at the time. Remember, Bill? We walked in the atomic clock. Yeah. The second hand kept going around and around and around and around. And Dave was like, "Oh, you too, when you get here." No.
No, we've had our share of disturbances, and the biggest disturbance on air was not with us. I mean, we lost stuff, but the on air disturbance, which was incredible, was with the fellow down. This is going to be not good for broadcast because I can't think of the fellow's name, but he was talking from South America, and every time he started to talk about his psychic stuff that was going on, this incredible more than interference, wow, would come up. Yeah. So, unfortunately, I can't think of the man's name. That would have made the story good.
That's exactly what makes your research so difficult, though, is these things pop up out of nowhere. You cannot reproduce them, as, of course, modern science would want you to do. You can't measure them. You can't quantify them. You can't reproduce them at will. It's data that springs up here and here and just never has. All you can say is it happened, and that's it.
We try to cram it into a controlled setup, and it doesn't always stay controlled. But I just wanted to briefly mention what happened when Ed Edwards was here.
Sure.
So we were running one of the protocols, and he later told me he was on a roll. He gets feedback at the end of each PK trial, and he said he was getting hit after hit. And on trial number 13, the system just seized up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it doesn't normally do that. So fortunately, we were able to restart and keep getting our trials. But I thought that was a pretty interesting sign that something was going on with him.
Yeah, well, he sounds like a fascinating individual. Everybody who has met him, who I've spoken to, has been very impressed with him. So he's certainly somebody who we want to hear more from, as well as from you. So what's coming up for Dr. Ross Dunseath?
Well, what's coming up is find me more subjects.
Well, put the call out. Put it out right now on our show. We don't guarantee anything, but it couldn't hoit, as we say in Brooklyn. It couldn't hoit.
Yeah.
Boon benders of America, listen up.
There you go. And I'd say subject sort of facetiously that really we're co-investigators, but we're looking for folks who can really do it and want to get and engage in some laboratory research and help humanity understand what's going on with this stuff. So,
do you see any practical application for it? I mean, in a very crass sense. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be that.
Well, I think healing is probably the first one. That's such a good one too.
Well, you're associated with the medical school at the UVA, right? No, or I thought you were. No.
No.
Well, DOPS it's in the Department of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences.
It is, yeah. And I know in Germany you can specialize as an MD in psychosomatic medicine, and I think healers probably do what they do without realizing how they're doing it. And if you could train these people to be able to know sort of how they're doing it, I think that would be a wonderful thing. Because
we had a resident here a few years ago. She's since graduated and left, but she was trained in the Barbara Brennan School.
Don't know.
So she was also a psychiatrist, trained psychiatrist, and she knew what she was doing. Mm-hmm. She would bring those two modalities together and use energy healing and also work on the mental aspects. And I can tell you that was quite powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this has been like a really fascinating show today.
I can't believe it's over.
I can't believe it's almost over. We have a few more minutes. And do you want to leave any kind of an address for people to send, or an email address for people to send to you if they want to co-create this study with you and be a subject, if you will?
I would ask folks to just look up DOPS, DOPS, UVA, Google it, and you can get in touch with us through that. Through our website, there's ways to contact us there. I think that's probably the easiest thing to do.
And do you have a lot of published papers for people that may not be subjects but would be interested in reading about your work?
The DOPS website lists various publications. I don't have very many myself. Most of my stuff are patents for instrumentation. It's not very interesting.
Well, cool. Well, it is interesting, because it's a way for this work to move forward if you have created instrumentation to measure it.
But see, that's the part that scientists never admit, that creation of all their different theories and so on is indeed a mental creation. And it doesn't, obviously it springs from prior works, but there's a little mentality to it too.
And I'm just, I'm seeing that, and I'm thinking now just simply about the work I've done with creative visualization, which is seeking to do almost a PK kind of effect, but a more diffuse PK kind of effect. And the idea of using more than one person, like gathering a group, to do creative visualization for each person in the group, like each person has a foreseeable goal, something that's tangible and measurable, and they can accomplish this. But the group together, the group energy, sees it happening and helps move it forward in the world. And I can see how these two things can be possibly related. So would you like to give us any final words there, Ross?
Final words.
Well, I don't mean ultimately final. I mean, kind of like a send-off for us here.
I don't know.
That's
I
okay.
guess.
That's okay.
No. That's okay.
That's okay.
But Dr. Dunseath,
Okay.
honestly, we know you're a very busy man, and you're certainly an extremely accomplished person, and really we're sincere thank you for taking this hour to be with us. It was a most enjoyable conversation. Thank you so much.
Really, thank you. Thank you, Ross. Take care
Great.
now. See you soon.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Oh, that was great. I enjoyed that, Fahrusha. I don't know about you, but that was, it's honestly, it's not my main area of interest, but boy, it really piqued my curiosity.
Well, I tend to think that the more you know about the paranormal, the more it becomes almost, I'm going to say, this is of course not scientific word, but a unified field, not like the unified field theory of
Well, they still
physics.
haven't established that.
They haven't established that. But, where one thing bleeds into another, which was about like the last kind of thing I was saying, like with the intentionality and that sort of thing. When you get a large group together and you do a creative visualization for one another, and you all see, a certain project moving forward, like you sit there and you all see Mary Jane passing the bar examination. Well, that might really help Mary Jane pass the bar examination. And is it PK or is it not PK?
Hey.
We can't say. But what about if all these things are related simply to the consciousness element and the fact that we're all one on some other level, while we all have these monkey suits on, and we're all these flesh puppets here, but underneath the consciousness is all one.
Well, I tell you, that's your opinion, and they've heard my opinion. Now we want to know your opinion. Please.
Yes, indeed.
Please. Come on.
Please catch us on iTunes or go to our website, shatteredrealitypodcast.com, and there you can leave us your questions. You can make requests for other guests, and if that person is to our liking and agrees to come on, why, they'll be on Shattered Reality in the future. So please write in, text us, anything like that. Please let us know. We're on Facebook. It's under Shattered Reality Podcast, but it is under the subcategory of radio, okay? Even though we are on the internet and Facebook is on the internet, they still do not have a podcast category, amazingly enough.
And if enough people put like, now that's a group thing.
Yes.
And maybe they will bring a whole big radio show into being if we get enough likes.
Yes, we need good ratings on iTunes, and we need likes on our Facebook page and that sort of thing. So please help us out. Send us some input as to what you think about the show and what you'd like to see here next. So for Kate Valentine and myself, prepare to have your paradigm shifted.
You betcha. Take care, you guys.
Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality. Shattered Reality.